Yep, for today's ADG Pro video, we're taking yet another look back at the original DOS version of Dangerous Dave. I mean, this is a game I always make a run through at least once or twice a year, just to kill some time, because it's super simple and challenging without being overly punishing when you mess up. Except, well, every time I go back to this, I'm trying to get as many points as possible. But what if we turn this notion on its head, and instead try to see how few points we can end the game with? Funny thing is, this just made an otherwise challenging experience even more challenging. You'd think going for less points would be easier than going for more, but that's just not the case at all. Doing a minimum score run here means not only avoiding as much treasure as you can, but trying to find ways to avoid treasure which is placed right where you need to go, as well as dodging enemies instead of killing them, since you get points for using the gun to kill an enemy. More pertinently than that, though, is when you have to kill an enemy to get by, and the question now becomes, do you have to use the gun, or can you do it by making contact, given that touching an enemy kills both the enemy and Dave, but does not award points? Well, those of you familiar with the game probably already have at least a rough idea of how high the minimum winning score might be, seeing as you have 10 levels to clear, and each level requires that you grab a trophy, which is worth 1,000 points, then leave through the exit door, which is worth 2,000 points. So you absolutely must score 3,000 points on every level, which means the minimum winning score for the game must be somewhere over 30,000 points. So, let's go through each level in sequence and see where we end up and what we need to do to keep that score counter down. Though, one thing I should quickly point out is that the bottom stats for the jetpack and gun may seem a little off. Not to mention I seem to have infinite lives. Yeah, I'm using a trainer to figure this out because I don't want to have to replay 20 minutes worth of gameplay just to get a handful of attempts to dodge an enemy, then have to spend 20 minutes again getting up to the same enemy again. Now that said, even though I'm using a trainer here, I am keeping the normal restrictions of the level in mind in terms of whether I would have the gun or jetpack at certain points or not, as well as how many lives I'm burning from touching enemies, since you can only normally keep 3 extra lives in stock at a time, which is also the number of lives you start a new game with. Also, I think it goes without saying that we won't be seeing the secret levels at all. So let's go in order, starting with level 1. Unfortunately, it's impossible to get the trophy without grabbing at least one of the 100-point diamonds. So no matter what, this level is worth 3,100 points. Level 2 immediately throws an interesting jump in our path, with a 100-point diamond in the middle of the jump arc. Unfortunately, it's not possible to make the jump without grabbing this diamond, as evidenced by being able to grab it and yet still miss the jump. But Dave's hitbox works in a very unusual way when it comes to detecting collisions with objects and hazards. In fact, with one exception we'll discuss later, Dave is always in contact with 4 tiles at a time. If Dave's walking on the ground and is perfectly aligned over top of a tile, then the extra tiles he collides with for item pickup purposes are to his right and down. Suffice to say, this makes getting through the rest of level 2 without touching the purple gems near the end an interesting prospect. Thankfully though, in terms of solidity, Dave has a lot more leeway during jumps than he does when moving left or right. So if you position yourself carefully so that you're not perfectly aligned in a tile space, you can make straight jumps which carry you into a wall, or can fall straight down within a wall space slightly so as to avoid picking up stuff. This leeway is what allows us to get out of level 2 without collecting a single purple gem. Thus we end up with the same number of points for level 2 as we did for level 1, 3,100. Level 3 is where things get a lot more interesting. Not only are there a lot of jumps we can't make unless we grab a scoring item in the process, but there's also 2 spider-like enemies to deal with. Now, normally, once you're aware of these enemies, you just time a jumping shot with the gun to take them out. But what even are they doing when they're not on screen? And is it possible to evade them entirely? Well, getting a glimpse of their full movement pattern reveals that they have a very elongated pattern, with a sort of curve in the middle on their way to the left, which leaves a sweet spot in the middle where one can stand and not get hit. Fortunately as well, they don't have a high rate of fire for shooting at you. If you know what to do and do it fast, then it is indeed possible to dodge both spiders fairly consistently. But once you make a mistake, or the level's had a chance to stew for a bit, the firing patterns become less predictable and may trip you up completely at random. So yeah, dodging them is doable, but extremely difficult to do right. For the first spider, you want to jump slightly into the right edge of the weird weed it gets close to, then wait for it to make a pass where it fires a shot. This will give you enough time to follow it and get down into the gap where it doesn't reach. Let it pass over, jump to the next gap, and then jump over the spider when it makes its next pass going left. For the second spider, you want to jump and follow it immediately, then walk right up to the left edge of the weird weeds in the next gap, remembering that you cannot get as close to these weeds when walking as you can when falling straight down without getting killed. Then, you need to wait for the spider to pass over you going left, then follow it when it passes over you going right, and jump and land right on the right edge of the weird weeds. Once the spider passes over you one more time going left, position yourself under the final 100-point diamond and prepare to jump over the spider on its next pass. This entire sequence sounds easy, but the execution is anything but, given how their shot patterns work. But once you're through all of that, the rest isn't too tricky. You just fall down into the fire pit, wiggle a bit at the end so as not to touch the fire on the opposite side, then jetpack straight up to the door. When all is said and done, you can leave this level without ever touching the spiders, without ever shooting them, and by collecting only a minimum of 3,900 points. Level 4 forces you to get a 100-point diamond the instant you press anything. Plus, out of the next 3 diamonds, you must collect the last one, as there's no way to avoid it. But then we have the spiky monster. And since there's no gun in this level, you ultimately have to slam into this with your body to kill it, or find ways to evade it. Now fortunately, evading it isn't too tricky once you learn its most common firing patterns, of which there's 2. But the problem is the 100-point diamond immediately in your path. To evade this diamond, once you jump up into the danger zone, you need to immediately jump again and position yourself to fall straight down into the left edge of this wall. From here, the rest of the sequence is easy. Then you just go get the jetpack and come back. Getting back across so you can get the trophy, though, is very tricky with some very tight timing. And you have to get up to the top section here and time it so that you're following almost right behind the enemy as it travels off the left edge of the screen across the top. But you also have to make sure to turn off your jetpack the instant you're across, or you'll run into a 100-point gem right after the screen scrolls. Then you just gotta run for it before the enemy has a chance to catch up and shoot you. If you can make it back across, getting the trophy and getting back the other way should be simple, but right at the very end, you have to have a very light touch in your jetpack control, so as to just barely clip into the floor level where the door is at. Fly just a couple pixels too high, and you'll collect the treasure immediately above you. Ultimately, you can end level 4 collecting only 3,200 points. Level 5 is a neat one because it's extremely intimidating, except, well, we're actually just going to skip most of it. The trick here is that if you act fast and don't hesitate, the enemy cycles should be good so that you can just run all the way towards the first major jump to the floating platforms, then jump straight for the moon and make sure to hold up and right the entire time. The moon and star tiles actually have the climbable bit set, meaning when you just raise the corner of the moon, you can start jumping up from it. This extra jumping will get you to the jetpack, which you can then immediately turn on the instant you have it, fly up high enough to get the trophy, then just fly all the way above the screen boundary and to the right to just walk over the rest of the level. You do have to be careful right at the end though, as there's a crown you will absolutely pick up by accident if you just walk off the ledge here. Instead, get close to the edge, then do a jump and a very light tap to the right. This should give you the extra distance to fall down along the left edge so as not to get close enough to get the crown. Then just hit the jetpack button at the right moment and pass through the door, making this one of the very few levels you can actually clear with only 3,000 points, 1,000 for the trophy and 2,000 for the door. Level 6. Oh boy. I think out of all the levels you'll have to go through in a minimum score run, this is probably the hardest of all of them. And first off, you immediately get the jetpack and immediately use it to get the gun. Now, fair warning, you need to burn a lot of jetpack fuel to pull this all off, so you need to use your jetpack in the shortest bursts possible to get through all of this. Next, we're immediately faced with an enemy blocking the path, and unfortunately, there's no way to run into this enemy with your body. You have to kill it with the gun, so that's an unavoidable 600 points right there. The next series of jumps isn't too tricky, but one of them requires a very brief burst of jetpack fuel to make. Now once you reach the longer platform here, you want to walk right just enough to scroll the screen, then stop moving. Wait for the upper enemy to fire a shot and for the shot to move over you, then press and hold up and right together to jump towards the next section. if you didn't scroll the screen first, you probably won't make this jump. Now, in theory, it might be possible to get by that upper enemy entirely, but given the accuracy of what you need to do next, it's not really feasible. So this is the first enemy we're going to intentionally burn a life on. Now if I didn't have infinite lives, there would be 2 remaining following, though I'd actually be really close to earning an extra life at 20,000 total points, which is pertinent because we're going to need to burn 4 extras over the course of this run. There will be no extras to spare. Next up, we need to use the jetpack to position ourselves to drop down this opening edge to the left side. If you edge to the right side instead, you'll collect 3 purple gems, as opposed to just 2 if you do this on the left. Now, you can technically avoid the purple gems entirely by taking the rightmost path with the weirdweeds, but unfortunately, it's not possible to get past the enemy if you go this route without killing it with the gun. 100 points for 2 purple gems is a lot less than 600 points for killing the enemy with the gun. But regardless, it's in the way, so we want to land on it to kill it without earning points and burn another life. Then we repeat the whole process of going down there a 3rd time, collect the trophy, make our way back out the same way, and carefully get past the remaining platforms and treasure to make it to the exit door. Again, this level is extremely hard to get a minimum score on, and if you run out of jetpack fuel, well, unless you're right at the end, you're probably not going to be able to clear the level with a minimum score anymore. But if you do pull all of this off, you will end the level having collected only 3,700 points. Level 7. So this level is actually fairly simple to get a minimum score on, save for having to deal with the very first enemy. Now, since all of the enemies in the game fire on a timer and can only have 1 shot in the air at a time, the trick is you need to try and ensure that this enemy won't be firing when you jump over it. Because jumping to the first platform is easy, but there's not enough time to jump to it and then jump off of it without hitting that first enemy. So you have to jump over the first enemy instead. And if you do that just as it's getting ready to shoot, you're probably going to get shot in the process. The best way to figure out the timing is to just watch the height of the enemy's shots. They start fairly high but will rapidly go down, then slowly rise again. Once the shots are high up, you should be able to pull off this jump to the first platform, and then jump over the enemy to the second. The ring is easy to dodge, since Dave jumps just a single pixel too short to touch things 3 tiles above him, and then you just walk off the edge to reach the 4th platform. From here, you want to make your way to the jetpack as fast as possible. Once you have the jetpack, you climb the tree to get as high as you can and make a jump towards the ceiling, and then turn the jetpack on. From here, you're going to fly over most of the level until you get blocked by a 100-point diamond. Then you fall straight down onto the edge of the fire platform, jetpack again to get by it, then just make your way to the trophy. Getting back is basically the same process but reversed, and without the risk of being shot. Once again though, you can clear this level collecting only the bare minimum of 3,000 points. Level 8 is a breath of fresh air surprisingly, and is relatively simple compared to everything up to this point. But firstly, don't bother going for the gun because you don't need to kill any of the enemies here. Instead, get the jetpack and head below the bottom of the screen, but make sure to land on top of the level and proceed to walk all the way to the right. Since the last little bit of the level does not equate to a full scroll of the screen, scrolling the screen this little extra bit helps to align things better for surviving the jog through the second half. Once you head back into the level proper, dodge the weird weeds and wait for the enemy to fire a shot, then make a jump to get yourself into the closest gap which leads to the bottom of the screen. From here, it's pretty obvious how to clear the rest of the level, as there's very little treasure in the way, and the enemies are much easier to dodge when you can see their full patterns at all times, given that they don't move very fast. You should once again be able to clear this level with only 3,000 points acquired. Level 9 is an interesting one to be sure. Firstly, don't take the upper platform where the crown is. Instead, go for the lower platform, keeping a careful eye on which platforms are fake and which ones are real. Next, it should be possible to just fall off the platforms and get through the gap in the bottom to wrap around to the top of the screen, but you may need to wiggle back and forth a little during the fall so as not to touch the flames. Now once you're on top, head right until you're right up to the edge, then do a jump and tap right so that you can fall straight down, grab the trophy, and easily land on the long pillar. From here, you need to time a jump so that you're falling diagonally between the 2 100-point gems while still managing to land on the edge of the bridge area and without getting hit by the enemy. It's a little tricky to pull off, but not too difficult. When heading across the bridge into the platforms following, you're going to be forced to grab 2 100-point diamonds as they're impossible to avoid. However, Remember when I said there was an exception to how Dave's collision handling is being handled? Yeah, there's a diamond up near the top which looks like it's in the way, but when Dave crosses the top of the screen, his collision properties change somewhat, making it possible to jump over said diamond without collecting it. Thus, we ultimately reach the end of the level, having collected only 3,200 points. And then finally, level 10. Normally, when you're trying to get as much treasure as possible, this level ends up being relatively difficult. But for the sake of a minimum score run, it's surprisingly consistent. Basically, what you want to do is play things out as normal at first, then head for the gun, because we have to somehow get past 3 enemies, but by this point, if we've been playing things out perfectly, we only have 2 extra lives to spare. Now, all 3 of the enemies we need to get by can be taken out by touching them, so it's mostly a matter of personal preference which one to shoot and which 2 to slam into. Me personally, I prefer to shoot the very first one, as I'm very consistent with touching the other 2, but not that first one. Following this, we want to touch the second enemy, but we have to position ourselves to do it first, since the enemies here move very fast, but their shots often extend out even further. And once we're positioned correctly, we just jump into it and there we go. 3 deaths total up to now. 1 more we can take without getting a game over. From here, getting the jetpack is fairly simple, but before we head for the trophy, we actually want to head for the door first. The reason is because of this last enemy that we have to deal with. If we head all the way to the right to grab the trophy, we'll once again desync the scrolling of the screen, which in this case makes it impossible to touch the final enemy that we have to deal with. See, this enemy down here just barely touches the edge of the screen normally in its movement patterns, and there's a consistent way in which it does it too. What we want to do is position ourselves right up against this wall, then wait for the enemy to stop flickering on the edge of the screen for a moment. Then, the instant it starts flickering again, we hold left. Done right, the enemy should slam right into Dave as soon as the screen scrolls, ensuring the enemy doesn't have a chance to shoot first, and even if it did, it should run into Dave before the shot reaches Dave. With the enemy defeated, now we can travel all the way to the right to grab the trophy, head all the way back, but then we have one final set of treasures to dodge. And the way to do it though is really simple. You just climb the green bush here in this spot, and align Dave so that his head is just touching the ceiling. Then head left and toggle the jetpack near the weirdweed. This should give you the perfect positioning to dodge the treasure above you and clear the bridge. Then it's just a little more movement to the door, and we'll have beaten the level, collecting a total of 4,450 points. And that's it. With all 10 levels figured out, we can now calculate what a perfect minimum score run through this game should look like, and the final tally shows that a minimum winning score is 33,650 points. Glitchless. Oh yes, it turns out things get interesting if we decide to allow glitches. One particular glitch I've mentioned before is how you can jump up sets of walls from their left side if you can position yourself just right ahead of time underneath them. And while this glitch doesn't really have a lot of practical uses during a normal run, it absolutely comes into play in level 10. Using this glitch, it becomes possible to completely avoid the first enemy, as jumping up onto the ceiling here is normally impossible, as you can see, but if we use the wall jumping glitch, it's very possible to get up here early and skip said enemy. Thus, if we only have to deal with 2 out of the 4 enemies instead of 3 of them, we don't need the gun to kill one. This also means we start using the hole in the roof of the level near the jetpack as an access point, which does indeed net us a purple 50-point gem, but this also lets us skip 4 purple 50-point gems on the way to the gun, and a 100-point diamond in the path of dealing with the first enemy, with the first enemy itself being worth 1,000 points. Everything otherwise plays out as usual, and the final score for this level with glitches becomes 3,200 points, which means the minimum winning score with glitches is technically 32,400 points, having grabbed only 2,400 points more worth of stuff over the trophy and door requirements. But what if I were to tell you that the actual minimum winning score with glitches is even less than that, at only 30,600 points? There's just one really massive catch if you want to achieve a 30,600 point run. It involves abusing a glitch that you can only perform once per run, which affects every run following. Whenever you're in the middle of a game, if you want to go back to the title screen, you press F3 to restart. Straightforward enough. However, there's a bug with how it handles restarting, and if Dave happens to be touching the space that an item would normally be in when you do this, it permanently erases said item from the map. Well, in memory. As soon as you quit out to DOS and restart the game, the level data is reloaded, and everything you eliminate in this manner will be back where it's supposed to be. But until then, any item you erase will be gone for every run following. Suffice to say, this glitch essentially allows you to perform multiple runs in a row and erase a single item from existence for each of those runs, provided you don't shut the game down following. Now, since you can't erase the doors, and erasing the trophies would prevent progress, you still have to get the points for those. Plus, there's still that enemy at the start of level 6 that you absolutely need to shoot to get past. But if you have an insane amount of time to kill, you can effectively erase every forced scoring item from every level. Then just do the minimum score run as normal, and finish with a grand total of 30,600 points. And yeah, even though I've been using a trainer for all of this testing, I can confirm this glitch works without the trainer too. So, am I going to attempt to do a minimum score run to prove my results? Heck no. I enjoy this game, yeah, but not enough to subject myself to that level of insanity. But hey, don't let that stop any of you. In fact, while I normally don't permit self-promotion links in the comments, for this one video, if you pull off a minimum score run through this game, feel free to post the link to your run in the comments. Just don't feel too compelled to attempt this, because again, this minimum score run requires nothing less than perfection. A single mistake, like a missed pixel or a mistimed key press, can destroy the run, so be very aware of what you're getting yourself into before you attempt it. Anywho, that's all for today's ADG Pro video. Next week will be a normal Ancient DOS Games review, episode 279, where we're actually going to be covering yet another game that starts with the letter Z. Mind you, unlike Zelyard, which had sprite-based cutscenes, this one goes all in with full motion video. So be sure to tune in next Saturday to see what game I've got in store. Thanks for watching, everyone, and extra special thanks to those of you supporting me on Patreon. Here's just a small random set of you guys.